right now, I'd like to welcome our candidate and our current state senator, Senator Josh Newman.
Wonderful. I am here today not as a candidate, but before I start, I want to thank everybody for all of your support in the March primary. I finished a very comfortable first, and now it is me against Stephen Choi, who has absolutely no right to serve in the California State Senate. So thank you all for all of the support. Thank you. And I'll come back at some point. We'll talk about that. But I'm actually here to introduce my friend and colleague and mentor, Senator Toni Atkins, the pro tem emeritus of the California State Senate. When Toni gets here, like I said, she's here. She's here. She's here. Everybody, Toni Atkins is here. All right, so it is my honor to introduce my friend, mentor, colleague, Senator Atkins. Very quick kind of introduction, background for the senator. She's from Appalachia. I said that right, didn't I? Appalachia. Nobody pronounces Appalachia to her satisfaction, apparently. I'm glad to get that right. But Senator Atkins is from Virginia originally, made her way to California, to San Diego, where she was the director of clinic services for Women Care Health Center in San Diego. And that you will hear from her. That gives her a grounding on some very important issues. She then worked for city council member Christine Kehoe, who eventually became a state senator. When council member Kehoe moved on, Senator Atkins took her place on the San Diego City Council. She was the leader of the city council. For a time, she was the interim mayor of San Diego. She was elected to the assembly in 2010, first for the 76th Assembly District, which became the 78th Assembly District. In 2014, then Assembly member Senator Atkins became the Speaker of the California State Assembly. She was only the third woman and the first out lesbian to be elected Speaker of the Assembly. Give that a round of applause. In 2016, she and I were both elected to the California State Senate. We went our separate ways. I managed to get recalled, and Toni managed to become the pro tem of the California State Senate. That's why I go first. She goes second here today. And I will be forever grateful. I should say nobody did more for me in my efforts first to combat the recall, but then following to regain my seat in the Senate. I have the weird distinction of being the only state senator ever to be recalled and regain my seat, and for that I owe a debt of gratitude to Senator Atkins. But in addition to solving that little problem, Senator Atkins has done much, much more. She has been the leading voice, has probably done more for Californians, for LGBTQ Californians, for reproductive rights in California than any member of the legislature ever. And that deserves a round of applause. And you will hear from her. And more broadly, we are all very fortunate, the members of the California Senate Democratic Caucus, to have had the benefit of Senator Atkins' leadership as pro tem. She is a team player. She's the most generous legislator I've ever met. She took care of all of us, even while providing direction in her collegial, good-humored, but very firm way, kept the Senate on track, made contributions to California that we will praise and for which we will be grateful for many, many years. And with that, it is my honor to introduce my friend and colleague, Senator Atkins.
So good morning. It is morning. Yes, it is. Well, I want to thank my colleague. He's going back to get on our caucus Zoom, which I was on for the last 15, 20 minutes. We planned this well in advance. I was invited. I said, we got budget going on. It's got to be after June 15th. So, it's a Saturday. What could possibly go wrong? When we got the notice last night that we had a caucus Zoom to talk about continued budget discussions, I'm like, you got to be kidding me. And Josh, I was looking forward to being here with him and getting a chance to mingle before the lunch and before I got to speak because, I like to get a sense of who I'm talking to. And so we didn't have that luxury. He's in the back. He went back on the Zoom. I hope he's representing us both well. So what happens is, of course, we have a constitutional deadline, June 15th, as a legislature to agree upon a two-party agreement. You're all good Democrats and you love civic democracy. So that two-party agreement between the Senate and the Assembly, it's our response to the governor's proposal in January, and then the May revision to the budget once we see what our revenues look like. And that's been a little hard this year because, we went through COVID when we didn't know what our revenues would be necessarily. And then we had a major, if you can even believe it, hurricane and flood that impacted San Diego County. So they gave San Diego County, where I live, an additional 6 months to file our taxes, which, means we don't have a true up of all of our revenues. So it's been a little volatile. That in mind, we managed to get a two-party agreement in June 15th by the deadline. But then we have all those interesting things called trailer bills. There are trailer bills that follow the budget bill. You didn't know you were going to get a reminder of a civics lesson in California today, did you? But it impacted my ability to be here in a more timely fashion to get to really enjoy this time with you before you all sat down. So we're on the Zoom to talk about the fact that we have finally gotten a three-party agreement with the governor. Now, they didn't tell me that was confidential, so I hope you know first. We've got a three-party agreement with the governor, which on Monday and Thursday of this week coming up, we will then have to vote on all of those trailer bills, on those outstanding items that we were not in agreement as a legislature with the governor on. And then, of course, we had some ballot measures that now will be coming off the ballot because we were able to negotiate with the stakeholders and the proponents of various ballot measures. Now, you may get into that a little bit later, or the questions. I say all this to say I'm so sorry I'm actually late. And that my good colleague, who I would love to tell you, I would love him to hear, I equally think very highly of Josh Newman, and he is now, after redistricting, your state senator and obviously up for re-election. And I will tell you, having lived through his election, we got elected, as he said, the same time, and then watching that painful recall of someone who took a very courageous vote, whether people like it or don't like it. He was that one vote, and he got really the blame by those who wanted to recall him as we voted on something to try to have resources to fix our streets, roads, bridges throughout this state. And then he really didn't step away. He continued to work hard, and we were able to bring him back. And I will tell you, he's incredibly smart. He is the chair of our education committee. One of the most important issues, as people tell me all over my community and all over the state, education, K through 12, community college, and higher education. He is the chair of that committee in the Senate. He also serves, and he really earned this seat through all of his election, recall, re-election. He sits on the California Transportation Commission and is a representative from the legislature to figure out where those dollars go. And so it's a critical voice. He is good on so many issues, but I like him because he maintains a sense of humor through it all. And I would say, something near and dear to my heart, he's also a veteran. And the Senate has the highest number of veterans that it ever has had in modern day. We have 7 veterans, 3 women, and 4 men. And so I give him a lot of credit. That's what brought me to California, my sister's service in the military. But I want to thank you for your indulgence. I want to thank you for really inviting me to speak today about my time in the legislature, possibly my campaign for governor. We'll see where that conversation goes. But the issues that I have been able to focus on during my tenure in the Assembly and the State Senate really were shaped by my life experiences. And I think, as he mentioned, I do, like people like to call Appalachia. I think that's a kind of variety of grape. So I always try to correct people that it's Appalachia. It's a Native American word, and it's got a hard end on it, Appalachia. But I grew up in rural Southwest Virginia. My dad was a coal miner, a lead miner. My mom was a garment worker, a seamstress in a factory. And although they worked incredibly hard, we lived paycheck to paycheck. We rented a home with no running water. We actually had an outhouse and had to carry water from a spring. Not a well, a spring. There was a bullfrog in that spring. My parents rarely had time off. We didn't have health insurance, and we always had a doctor's bill to pay or a hospital bill. And in those days, I'm 60, I'll be 62 this year. In those days, you could actually pay those bills off over time. Not so true today, as we know. So they worked really hard so that their kids could have a better life. I was fortunate. I got financial aid through Pell and those grants. I got several scholarships, and I worked 3 jobs. I was able to go to college and earn a bachelor's degree, the first in my family to graduate from college. In the mid-'80s, I moved to San Diego. I came to help my twin sister, who was in the Navy, stationed in San Diego. My dad, by the way, served in the Navy during World War II, so I grew up hearing about a sleepy little town called San Diego. He was stationed in San Diego. And I have 2 brothers who went in the Army, but my sister went in the Navy. And, you know, that for my dad was a big deal. So she was here in San Diego in the 80s. She married a Navy guy. He was getting ready to go on an 8-month Westpac, and she was getting ready to deliver my nephew. And she was here alone. And so I came to California to help her back in the mid-'80s, and of course I never left. After helping my sister with my nephew for about 6 months, I got a job as a manager of a community clinic, Woman Care Health Center. And it was there that I was able to work on healthcare issues and help low income and women from Mexico actually access reproductive health care, even when anti-abortion extremists tried to blockade their way from getting into the clinic. A bit later in the early 90s, I volunteered. Josh mentioned my mentor, Christine Kehoe, who was the first LGBTQ person to get elected to the city council in San Diego. She served on the city council. She asked me to come work for her. I was honored to do that work. I loved it. I learned the importance of serving the needs of constituents and public service to improve the quality of life of our communities. And I will tell you, the reason I loved it so much and why it was so important to me is I grew up a poor kid. I didn't think society was about me. In fact, everything told me that it wasn't. And I always just wanted to be part of something bigger than myself, to be able to work on issues that helped everyday regular people. Chris Kehoe gave me that opportunity. I went to work doing constituent services. To this day, I love constituent services more than anything because it allows me to connect with you, to hear your story, to hear your struggles, and to know how to be able to move stuff forward. A responsive government, public service. So when Chris was termed out, she pushed me to run to replace her for the city council. And although I really didn't want to do that, I did. I loved the work. She went on to serve in the legislature, and I served on the city council for 8 years. I had a chance to be acting mayor during a pretty difficult time in San Diego. And you know what's interesting is in the good times, you really enjoy the things you get to do. And then in the bad times, you learn a hell of a lot that you wish you didn't have to learn. And it's always afterwards that you're grateful, right? They say, oh, your failures make you stronger. You're like, oh, hell with that. But it's unfortunately, it's really true. And I say all that by way of introduction of who I am personally, but also to tell you those early lived experiences really have shaped my priorities in public office. So when I talk about the work that I do and I focus on affordable housing, public education and higher education, the only reason I'm here is I got a decent public education and an opportunity to go to school and go to college, which gave me greater opportunities in life. Access to health care, and that includes reproductive health care. So, I would just say all of those things are the reason that I love the work I do, either in local government, which is the hardest. I think we might have some local elected officials here today, I think. There is nothing like serving in local government to understand where the rubber meets the road and what people really think of what's going on. And I'm grateful for that time because I think going to Sacramento without having had some experience in local government would produce a whole different kind of legislator. But I do think what I like to share with political groups and Democratic clubs is that the politics that we do is really the vehicle. It's the vehicle by which we get to do the policy, the budget work, and that what really reflects the values that we care about. And so I always like to kind of remind particularly political groups of that because, some people love politics. I am not one of those people, but I understand that it is what we have to do to be able to band together with other people to get elected and to be able to do the work on the policy stuff. Over the last 14 years in the legislature, I have been able to do some things I'm really proud of. And you'll see that it reflects the kind of stuff that have impacted my life and that of my parents and my neighbors and people I knew, my community growing up. I was able to establish and expand the California Earned Income Tax Credit. That's a tax credit that helps lower income families meet their basic needs. You marry that state tax credit. We've had a federal tax credit, but you marry that with the state earned income tax credit, and you get a little bit of relief and assistance back over and above. And when you put that with the child care tax credit that we had at the federal level that we were trying to, support and keep, you've got real resources to give back to struggling working families in California. I think when I was speaker, other things that I'm really proudest of, and this was a combined effort. I got to lead on some of these issues, but my colleagues really helped make it happen. When I was Speaker of the Assembly, we adopted a groundbreaking master plan for aging to ensure we have an aging population in California. I don't need to tell you that, and I am part of it. I had to correct my staff when they would have me do talking points about seniors. I'm like, you realize I'm one of those. That would be me. Somewhere over the last 30 years, I entered that category. But a master plan on aging to ensure that people live with dignity and respect and have access to services that we need as we age, hopefully in place. And we're busy implementing that now. You have a master plan, and we're busy trying to implement it. I authored SB 2 in 2017, and that was a measure to create ongoing funding for affordable housing. I created the California Dream for All program that prepared and offered a shared equity loan type of program for first-time home buyers, something very hard to do in California these days. But with 20% down, it makes it more affordable for first-time home buyers to actually get into a home. I authored the $7.5 billion water bond that was approved by the voters in 2014 to help us kind of ensure the sustainability and infrastructure of our water resources. And we are still spending some of that money today on the critical infrastructure. It's really helping local communities be able to get those dollars to do what's important for them in their part of the state. I wrote the Gender Recognition Act, which made California the first state to allow one's true gender identity to be reflected on their driver's license or other state documents. I authored the constitutional amendment approved by 2/3 of the voters in 2022 to enshrine the right to abortion and contraception into our state constitution. Thank you. And thank you for voting for that. Throughout my career, I have been fortunate to work on these issues that really, I think, impact some of our most vulnerable Californians. I hope to continue to be able to do that as your next governor. I want to serve as governor, not because I would be the first woman, although that's pretty cool, and it's about time. The governor of Baja California is a woman. The president of Mexico is a woman. I think California, we're a little behind, but I think we can catch up. But not just as the first woman or first member of the LGBTQ community, and not just because of those things, but because I really actually think I'm the most qualified. Actually, I know I am. I've done this for the last 14 years. I actually think experience matters. And there's some incredible people running, but I will just share with you. As leader of the Assembly and the State Senate, I've negotiated directly with 2 governors and passed 8 on-time budgets, balanced, building record reserves and protecting the progress that we have tried to make over the years together. I've had the opportunity to work on legislation regarding a huge multitude of other issues, including addressing climate crisis, sea level rise, environmental protection, criminal justice reform, homelessness, child care, mental health, workers' rights and safety, economic development, and so many other things. It's the one reason I love government. Look what we get to work on behalf of our constituents and our state. In short, I am ready to be the governor. In my campaign and as governor of California, I want to stay true to the values that I've mentioned briefly here, values that I was raised on, and the people and causes I've spent a lifetime fighting for and fighting with. I could never have imagined I'd be here before you today. Never. When I came to California in my early 20s, that someone with my humble background would ever have the opportunity to lead both houses of the legislature and be actually a viable candidate for governor. That's the California dream, and one that I have actually lived, and I'm running to make that dream possible for everyone. I want to thank you for inviting me to be here today. I would love for you to join me on that incredible journey. I would welcome your comments, your advice, clearly, and any questions that you'd like to have. And I know we were having a little bit of time for question and comments, but I don't know are you facilitating that? Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for the invitation.
I just, please give a big round of applause for Senator Toni Atkins, okay? Ray will ask the questions. Looks like he already has the first question.
Thank you. Well, we're going to start off with a strong one.
Oh, good.
It seems that state senators and assembly members are a lot more beholden to big money campaign donors than we'd like to think. Not really free to vote their conscience in the public interest at times. What is the solution to that? Nearly legalized bribery consistent with Citizens United?
Well, thank you. It's an important question because I would just say it is true. It takes money to run campaigns. And unless we have serious campaign finance reform, something we have not been able to do, we've talked about it for decades, I think you're going to find there are people like me, a candidate like Josh, if we're not able to raise money to run a campaign. I mean, the Democratic Party's busy raising money to run effective campaigns and to change Congress. It is a dilemma. I would say what's important is to see campaign disclosure. And we have, as we speak, there is legislation in the Capitol that talks about how we more and more make transparency possible. You know, it's not a perfect system. I can't run without campaign contributions. I am not independently wealthy. So what's the balance here? People who have a lot of money, who don't have to be beholden to anybody for a contribution, whether it's my neighbor or an entity representing you can say special interest stakeholders. You've got all kinds. You've got realtors, apartment association, the medical society. You've got environmentalists. From A to Z, there are stakeholders and special interests. Just depends on, how they do the work they do. I couldn't run without campaign contributions. The Democratic Party could not be successful without campaign contributions. You take money from some, you don't take money from others. I don't take oil, I don't take tobacco. There's others we in line with our values. But campaign finance reform, and in lieu of being able to overturn something like Citizens United, or to in fact do our own statewide campaign reform that passes constitutional muster, we've got to continue to look at transparency. Every candidate has to file forms that tell you where they get gifts, how much, and who they are. You have to report your gifts, you have to report your income, and I just say those are the things we have to look to keep a balance of what's going on in our democracy.
Thank you. These are some good potential governor questions. Is there a way to improve the income tax system of California to avoid the boom or bust nature of our budgets?
It's absolutely, I would love to see that happen, because here we are, the stock market is good. You would think the economy is fairly good despite some challenges. You see many states still today have a surplus, while California goes from surplus to deficit. We really were able to put the rainy day fund in place back in 2014, I think it was, when we did the water bond the same year. And that ensured that we would have $38 billion in a rainy day fund that we couldn't touch unless we were going into a dip and the volatility of our revenues. What we're now seeing is that we, because of our volatile revenues, we yet again are in a deficit situation because 2 years ago we projected our revenues, and we have to balance our budget based on revenues. And so unless we change our tax structure, which would be a vote of the people, and I don't know how many of you remember, I was trying to remember which governor this was under. I think it was Davis, that we had the 21st century for how we were going to look at readjusting how we pay taxes, whether it's income. And what came out of that was a lot of recommendations that the public didn't agree on. There was a lot of polling. Are you going to pay a tax on your manicure, your massages, your mechanic services, or various services? So we as a state have not decided in a way that we could get the votes from all of the people how we want that tax structure to be different. And so until we're able to do that, the one recommendation I heard, and I actually heard Gavin Newsom mention it, and it bears some real consideration. In addition to our rainy day fund, should we have another fund that has, that we build up, that has more reserves in it, so that we keep a higher level of reserves and we don't put it into new programs or projects? I mean, what we did the last 2 years to try to deal with that issue was we put a lot of the actual additional surplus we had that we could spend that didn't go into the rainy day fund, we put it into one-time infrastructure projects. So if you're seeing stuff go on throughout communities in California that are infrastructure, one-time funds that don't require ongoing money, that's what we did with a lot of that, which is not a bad idea because, our infrastructure is aging. If you don't keep up with it, you feel it in your communities. But this is one of our biggest struggles. How do we do that? And I will say, in addition to that rainy day fund of about $38 billion, we have a Prop 98, that's an education reserve, we have a healthcare reserve, and we have a regular reserve. So we really have tried to buffer all of those things so that we're protecting ourselves from real cuts. Remember real cuts a decade ago to healthcare, to all education? So we're trying to work on all of that, but again, whatever we come up with to replace this current system we have, you're going to have to vote on. So we've got to make sure that we have a majority plus of folks, actually almost 2/3 in this regard, to determine how we're going to address our volatility in our revenues.
Thank you. Here's a couple of questions related to low-income housing. What should be the next step for affordable housing in California? And then a specific question regarding the Laguna Mall. What is its status, and what percentage of housing is low income?
I got no idea on the Laguna Mall thing, I'm sorry. No, okay, oh, somebody has some expertise there. So I won't try to tackle that. I will admit what I don't know. Obviously, that's something really important here locally. In terms of housing, look, over the last 2+ decades, we have watched as our housing development has gone down. And there are people who argue about whether we need more housing units or not. I've heard those conversations. What I know is there is something to this supply-demand issue. If we don't have enough supply, then people are not going to be able to rent or buy at reasonable prices for middle-income people, and in particular low-income people. So, we have put forward funds for decades. We've had housing bond funds. We have put aside money for subsidized housing, low-income subsidized, whatever you want to call it, to try to make sure that there are units set aside for those of us in society who have lower incomes. We are now in a situation where middle-income folks cannot afford to rent or buy. And some of that is due to the market. We need more development, but the market dictates it. We are a market-driven economy in so many ways, whether we're talking healthcare, housing, whatever. But the market has proceeded to build more high-income units, so we've had to legislate to ensure that we get some percentage of what's being built in this day and time by developers and those who put money into development, that we get some low income, that we get middle income, and a lot of what's being built is more luxury. So housing policy is complicated. it has a lot to do with finance and tax credits. But over the last decade, we have done a lot on legislation to move and support development. We've done a lot with budget. We've done a lot with trying to make sure that we're spending more money on lower income housing. And I think where we have the biggest challenge right now is middle income housing. We used to have something called redevelopment. You may remember. It could have been reformed, and we should have reformed it, but accidentally getting rid of it was not a good idea. But that gave money, about $1 billion a year throughout the state of California, 20% set aside for housing, up to 120% of area median income. But in this day and time, we actually need funds that will help build up to about 160, 80% of area median income so that we get that missing middle income. These are not easy soundbite questions, by the way, Ray. My spouse, who's here with me today, already says I'm a little too talkative, but these are complex issues, and housing is probably one of the most complex. But we have made some strides there, but now we have to catch up. We did not build enough housing for about the last 3 decades. So when you have to catch up and build units of housing, and then you have to look at those numbers and determine how many are going to be set aside for very low income, middle income, and then you have to address those that would not be considered subsidized, but, you know, every day what would have been for many of us growing up middle-class families and middle-class couples. That's our challenge, and I think we've made a lot of strides over the last 2 decades, but it's going to take time for us to solve a problem that we worked to create for 30 years.
Here's a timely question related to the Supreme Court.
Which issue?
The so-called Supreme Court. The 3 Supreme Court justices appointed by the other guy only got 51 votes from the Senate. Can we mitigate their influence because of that?
Well, we in California, I think you must mean I'm going to not focus on federal. I mean, look, we've got a lot of work to do. I'm glad to see Ada here and people from the Democratic Party. We've got a lot of work to do on national elections. I've been engaged in statewide elections. I have been a speaker and a pro tem and gotten elections done. And by the way, Orange County has been one of our strongest partners in actually helping to make sure that we have a supermajority in the state legislature. And Orange County has been incredible in terms of turning the tide to get people in Congress elected. So you've been incredible partners with me at the state as we've done politics and campaigns, and I want to thank you for that. Federally, I mean, that is why 2024 is so critical. We have got to retake Congress. We have got to retake Congress because, you know, the so-called Supreme Court is not our friend. I mean, you know this. I hear you tell me this. I'm focused on state policy and bills and budget. But what we know federally is we have started to lose rights for the first time in our history. We have started to lose rights and to revert, you know, and that's the result of those appointments. In California, during the election to the guy, you know, that you didn't want to say his name either, well, you know, we know who our enemy is, frankly. And I don't care if you're a Democrat, Republican, declined to state, no party preference, it doesn't matter. This man is not someone that is looking out for America. And in California, during his first administration, or his only administration, let's hope, all we could do was hold the line. We could hold the line. We used our legal system. We used the policies that we put in place in California. We pushed forward with our California agenda, and we held the line. I don't know what another administration like that would do, because he will come after California. He's already said it. He doesn't like our policies. He doesn't like our values, and he is going to be he's going to get retribution from everything that we have held the line on: the environment, reproductive rights, civil rights. So we've got our work cut out for us. 2024 is a critical election. We always say it, but this time I think we actually really feel it.
Yeah, so it's so important. Here's someone that looks like they've done their homework, very specific. It says you voted for SB 1282, which allows judges to grant a diversion to defendants charged with felonies. including very serious crimes. If a judge grants diversion, the charges would be dismissed and we pay no restitution and can really, and legally buy a gun. Is this law still on the table, and why did you think it is a good idea?
Tell me about the gun part again. Just read that last sentence.
And can legally buy a gun
Okay.
if the charges would be dismissed and they pay no restitution and can legally buy a gun.
Someone can help me here. I mean, I know the legislation, but there's a lot packed in there. You know, if it's, I'm not remembering what 1282 specifically is. I got to be honest. Allows judges to grant diversion. Got it. So I thank you. I really appreciate this. Obviously, you know, we get all kinds of text messages and emails from people that agree or disagree. Our approach, this is helpful, thank you. Our approach to a lot of this, or at least the majority of legislators, and I would say Democratic legislators, because there is a little bit of a divide, and it stemmed from, you know, when we had the 3 strikes law on the books that ended up with tons of people in prisons. We started to rethink that, and the pendulum swung, and society started to feel like we're putting too many people in prison, and the people we're putting in prison are actually, many of them have had drug addictions, alcohol issues, poverty. You know, do we want to rethink how we do criminal justice? And I know it's a big issue right now because you've got Prop 47 being reconsidered, you've got sentencing, you know, all of those things are a big part of our discussion in society right now. And the legislature is truly trying to balance this by not having that pendulum swing back the other way. It feels today like crime is rampant. And what it is, the statistics don't bear it, but what we are seeing is the inability to go into Target without having to get someone to open a case to give us the laundry detergent or the razors or some medication. So it's feeling a little out of control. I think the legislature wants to be a little bit more thoughtful about when we talk about criminal justice reform. How do we stop filling up our prisons and spending most of our money and try to divert the people who actually deserve a chance for rehabilitation? You mentioned felony crimes. I mean, that's where you get further and further into the discussion. And some of the legislation we've passed has really tried to give the discretion to judges that we put in place to look at the case before them, presented by the DA and the public defender, and to see what's going on in the life of that person. Do they deserve to be in prison? Do they deserve a sentence? And I think what you're finding that gets missed in the sound bites and the emails, depending upon where you come from, is really, thank you, Toni. We travel in Toni's. This works with me. But the bigger issue, Toni's reminded me that bill is on the inactive file, so it's actually not moving forward. But it doesn't negate the conversation that we're trying to have about how we approach criminal justice, who we actually do lock up, who should be in prison for long periods of time, and who we should be trying to help rehabilitate. Because some of this is about mental health, some of it's about drug addiction, and some of it's about downright poverty that gave nobody an economic opportunity. Those are the conversations we're having. And when we can balance it and have a judge who is in the best position, if it's a good judge appointed by a good, reasonable governor, sorry, I'd like to think every judge is a good judge, but we know that we want to give judges working with the attorneys the ability to determine best how someone should be sentenced and whether they need support services. It's why we've put money into, this is such a huge issue, it's why we've put money into specialty courts. Any of you that are aware of things like the veterans courts, the homeless courts, when you look at courts that specifically deal with family issues and domestic violence, you know, when we look at some of those issues, we need to be better and better about how we figure out where people need to go. Is it incarceration? is it into some type of treatment and rehab so that we can do a better job, have fewer prisons, and put that money that we need to be saving into things like education and childcare? So I appreciate the question, and I thank you for bearing with me while I tried to figure out what the specific issue is. But I wanted to go with the overview because I think that's the better discussion for us to have.
Very good. Or if you're a convicted felon, you could just run for president. Take care of it that way.
You do comedy on the side.
Here's one that probably affects a number of our folks. People with disabilities are the most vulnerable populations. How can you prevent budget cuts to these programs?
Yeah. Well, I think it's why we have absolutely a conversation about budget reserves so that we don't have to do those cuts. Several years ago when I was speaker, I thought we were going to have to make cuts or we weren't going to get to allocate enough money for developmentally disabled services. I don't know what we do without some of the organizations that provide that care, either through our counties or special, regional centers. We really want to focus on not losing ground and using resources for that. And so I think we've been able to hold the line. But, several years ago when we thought we were going to have to cut those services, that was the negotiation with Governor Brown at the time. And I remember, we refused to accept the $50 million. And for about 6 months, I had to take the air and anger of the developmentally disabled community because I said, if we accept that $50 million, we're going to not get any more. And holding out 6 months got us $300 million. It was the largest increase for the DD community, developmentally disabled community, in decades. And so I think, we have our priorities. It has to be our priorities. And so our budget, the thing I'm proudest about is that as we put into place the rainy day fund and we built our revenues back, we have been able to hold the line. In the next couple of years, it's going to be really critical because it's going to tell us whether our rainy day fund, what else can we do to make sure that we're not going to cut services.
Thank you. Here's a question that could take the rest of the time.
No.
But I think it's important. You've already touched on this a bit. But how would your California governor's administration be different than the current administration?
Well, I like that question better than the reporters who ask me, am I more like Jerry Brown or Gavin Newsom? I'm like, well, my name is Toni, and there are things I like about both governors. I mean, different people are going to look at things differently. I think that, my approach is going to be, I never forget the to-do list. I don't know. Maybe that's a gender thing. I always have a to-do list and I check it off. I never forget things. We have done so much to implement incredible policies in California, whether we're talking behavioral health, mental health, child care that we've extended over the last decade significantly, not nearly enough, but significantly. All of these issues, I think we have to build on what we've done. And I don't think we need to start the new next brightest thing. I think we need to look at the basics. I think people really want to make sure that we're covering the basics. And I think it's about the quality of life that we lead. Our quality of life has gotten more and more difficult in California. When I got here, California gave me everything, every opportunity. And I feel like right now it's a critical moment that we need to really think about the basics. And so I think you saw Jerry Brown. He was very much a minimalist, but thankfully he helped us regain our financial footing in the state of California. And we took a decade and we built back our reserves and the ability to make sure we're not cutting services. Gavin Newsom couldn't wait to get started. He was the mayor of San Francisco. He had lots of ideas, and he has done a lot of incredible programs from A to Z. I mean, we like to joke with him, he's taking up all the oxygen in the room. The rest of us get none. But you know what? I'm grateful to him. We wouldn't have moved on housing. We wouldn't have moved on mental health. And you know what? I'm going to be a different person. I am going to be a different person, but I really think it is about the basics. It's about the quality of life. It's about the cost of living. And it really is about trusting each and every one of you to be part of that as we move forward. So, You know, I love all of the issues. When people also ask me, what are your top 3 issues? I'm like, that's impossible. You know, we have so many issues, and I want to, you know, thank you. I thank my community in San Diego for helping me be grounded. I do know that when I will hit the ground running day one. You're not going to have to explain CEQA to me, and don't ask me any CEQA questions. I'm kidding. You can if you want. It's the next one. It's the next one. Okay. I'm taking you on the road with me. You know, you never can be prepared for what hits your desk at 4 o'clock on Tuesday afternoon that you didn't see coming. You know, kind of like a pandemic. But we do know what our issues are, and those are issues we have to continue to work on. It's housing affordability. It's trying to get a handle and address homelessness. It is water sustainability. It is energy. You know, these are the things that are making up our high cost of living: housing cost, energy cost, and water cost. And it's about climate. So look, I am happy to know a little bit about a lot of those issues. And what I don't know, I also know how to pull in people who have solutions, ideas, and we can sit and talk about how to accomplish those things. So I'm excited about that opportunity, and I think I'll just end there. I don't intend to be Gavin, I don't intend to be Jerry, but I certainly want to use their counsel in any way, shape, or form I can. CEQA. No, CEQA.
This is our last one, folks, and I think it's a really good one to end with. How can Californians impact the national GOP drive towards autocracy and the fire hose of extreme right-wing propaganda media outlets?
Whoever wrote that had no opinion on, look, you know what we need to do. We have to be engaged. This is about our very lives. I mean, I don't know about you, but I joined a Democratic club the minute I got to San Diego because I wanted to be part of solutions. And, you know, in San Diego, I know this is a Democratic club, but when I got on the council in San Diego, it was 50-50. It was Republican, Democrat. I couldn't get anything done if I didn't learn how to work with other people. Now, I think most people want a good quality of life. But for us, our job is all about 2024. It is about this election coming up. It is about making sure that from the top of the ticket all the way down, because those local elections are where you grow the people that are going to be the leaders of tomorrow. And so I think I just remember when someone said, I'm running for the water board, will you endorse me? And I heard someone laugh. I'm like, why are you laughing? Water is the most critical issue we have in California. If you're willing to serve on the water board, you know, God bless you. You know, we need you. We need your talent. So the elections from every local board all the way up. But if we don't do the work here in this state for congressional seats, and of course we do know that the sentiment seems to be, I am reluctant to rely on polls all the time because, you know, I was looking at those polls when what's his name got elected, and you know, it was the most depressing thing in the world. People were calling the election before voting had ended, and look what happened. So we can take nothing for granted. We have got to work very hard, and you know, we all have relatives and friends in other states, right? We need to be talking to everybody, and we need to be doing the work here at home. And I know that you will, because that's what you do. So thank you very much. Let's get 2024 behind us in the most positive way so we can live our lives the way that we deserve here in California and in this country. Thanks a lot.
Senator, that's what I want to thank you. Part of our Nifty 60 program that we have, we call it our Bakers of Democracy. And all these folks have given very generously to our campaign to support local candidates.
Good.
And as our tradition is to present you with one of our blue Baker's caps that you can wear proudly all the time and in the governor's office.
Thank you. Well, if I get to the governor's office, you can come and we'll take a picture. Well, at least it goes with my outfit.
Oh, you look fantastic.
Thank you.
I don't know about everybody else, but I am so proud to have Senator Atkins as one of our elected officials in California and as a candidate for governor in 2026. And now, before we get to brunch, we're almost there. I would like to introduce our mayor, Noel Hatch, who has a brief presentation for the club. Mayor, please step forward.
That was a powerful talk, was it not? And I want to tell you, my wife and I moved here in 1997, and so we've been here a long time. And I still remember when I attended my first Democratic Club meeting. Linda Nearing was the chair at that time. There was no one like Linda. She was a fireball. She could do anything. There was a energy about her, and her next of kin, if you will, as a servant, was this young lady right here. And for years, well, I would save it for a bigger one in just a moment. I thought, though, year after year that they were sisters, because they both had that indefatigable energy and that drive and that personality, and they were alive. And then Linda left, but you have remained. And so if you'll raise your right hand like this to the square and promise that you will be here for many more years, that now I thank you. And now, if I may, just a little bit about you, okay? Sort of I wrote this myself, but this is how I feel about you guys. A certificate of commendation, City of Laguna Woods Democratic Club's 60th anniversary. Thank you.
Whoops. That didn't help, though.
All right. I'm too old for mics. All right. Whereas 60 years ago, in February 1964, a dream came true. A community exclusively for seniors aged 55 and older was born in the open fields of South Orange County. And whereas from that beginning, when 371 units sold in 1.5 hours, and the new village of Leisure World, now Laguna Woods Village, was born. Excuse me. Over the next few years, we morphed into a community of over 12,000 homes and 17,000 plus residents, precursor to the city of Laguna Woods. And whereas in tandem with that beginning, the Democratic Club came into being in or about May 1965. There is no recorded initial membership number, but there are now 472 active members, expected to reach 500 by the end of the year. You are one of the largest and most effective clubs in the village. And whereas this club has shown by its actions and good works these past 60 years that it is a significant asset to our community, providing leadership and funding for progress, projects, and issues that have greatly benefited the community and well beyond, including significant charitable work in partnership with South County Outreach, and is a voice listened to by the state Democratic Party organization. And whereas club members are a striking example of the spirit of this, our community of seniors, always being engaged with a sense of camaraderie, involvement, inclusiveness, and sparkle. And welcome to all. a sense that we really all here are brothers and sisters. Now therefore, be it resolved that I, Noel Hatch, Mayor of the City of Laguna Woods, do hereby congratulate the Democratic Club of Laguna Woods on its 60th birthday and extends our thanks for its many contributions over these decades and for the well-being of our community and its residents, and offers sincere best wishes for many years of continuing service ahead. Thank you very much. I got a hug.
And thank you, Noel, for your continued service to the city of Laguna Woods.